Hey everyone, welcome back to Ascending with Ashleigh. I'm Ashleigh, and thank you so much for being here. So today's Freedom Friday episode is going to be the beginning of a new series for this channel, which is all about breaking down the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. This is something that's incredibly near and dear to my heart. I received my master's degree doing this work, and I myself have been labeled by the DSM, incarcerated and force medicated and treated because of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So here is the 4th edition. I just want to show you what it looks like if no one's ever heard of it, or if y'all haven't heard of it. It's thick, and like I said, this is the 4th edition. There are 5, but have been 7 editions since they started. So we're on the DSM-5, but the 3rd edition and the 4th edition were both revised. So totaling 7. So I just want to break this down. This is, like I said, something I'm incredibly passionate about, complete nerd over. And I have a couple goals to get out of this. My main point is to think about how capitalism continues to breed these environments and situations, and then blaming individuals by using this diagnostic formula. I want to talk about the pathologizing of behavior that's being completely scapegoated as a mental illness. And I want to talk about the relationship between the DSM, Big Pharma, the CDC, the APA, which is the American Psychiatric Association, the ICD, which is the International Coding, or Diagnostic Coding. So it's a lot to unpack, and this is going to be more than one episode. It's going to be probably close to 10, because I have this is my passion project. Like I said, I did receive my master's degree doing this work, and it's time to share it with you all. Okay, so I have a shit ton of notes, and I'm pretty well versed in this, so I'm going to try and keep a cool pace and make it as accessible as possible. Below in the description box, I do have a few definitions just to remind folks of the words and terminology that I'm going to be using, so we're all coming from a common understanding. And then I have a list of the DSMs and the publishing year. And we'll talk at the end about what I want to continue moving forward with while we do this work. So, those are a few of my main points or my goals. So, I've already mentioned pathologizing. So, pathologizing behavior is how the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is made. So what happens is there's like this committee of psychiatrists or folks who are in the APA and have affiliates with the Food and Drug Administration and the CDC and the World Health Organization. And so what they do is they gather and they talk about behaviors, and then they label these behaviors with words like schizophrenia or bipolar or obsessive compulsive disorder or conduct disorder. So those are just a few of the big ones, and you've probably heard most of those. So I just want to speak to the process in which the DSM is made. And that's really important because, as we know, capitalism creates inhumane and unlivable conditions, and then folks who are even just navigating these systems for survival are oftentimes labeled with a mental illness. And once you're labeled with a mental illness, then you can be force medicated, you can be incarcerated if you're labeled as a threat to yourself or others, which is also known in law enforcement as a 5150. I've been labeled a 5150. So that's a threat to yourself or others, and it's based on behavior. So it's a behavioral policing. And so I know I've mentioned, I believe it was in the How to Heal video, about the relationship of us as humans having our affective, behavioral, and cognitive processes, and that's how our system communicates with itself. So the affective is the emotional, the behavioral is the actions, and the cognitive is our beliefs or our thoughts, okay? And so why I'm bringing that up is because for those of you who have not experienced being labeled with a mental illness or having a mental breakdown or a nervous breakdown or anxiety, for those of you who have never experienced what that's like, I can say in hindsight, having been through this and having experienced a 5150 labeling, that when I was experiencing those moments, my needs were not being met, and I was punished for not having my needs met by policing my behavior, right? So it's like a child. If you see a child and they're having a tantrum, there's something that they're trying to communicate that they're not having a need met, right? And in our society, we label children as manipulative and spoiled, when really that's their main way of communicating. And so as adults, when we're labeled with a mental illness because of bad behavior or behavior that's not suitable for society and what society deems appropriate, then mental illness is diagnosed. Then credibility for that person is completely lost. Relationships suffer. I mean, it's just, there's a lot. So I just want to back it up. Like I said, I'm super stoked about this. So backing it up, we have a relationship with ourselves and others, and the ABCs, the affective, behavioral, and cognitive, is always present between ourselves and others, as well as within ourselves, okay, in the greater environment. So really quickly, I want to talk about how that pathologizing is used to label folks with a mental disorder, and thereby basically doing whatever they want to you after that label happens. So for an example, I was labeled a 5150. I was completely stripped of my rights. I was put in mental institutions. I was also put in jail and trying to be heard. So someone who's going through a mental health crisis or going through an emotional crisis, and their behavior is showcasing that, or their behavior is reflective of their needs not being met. So once on the other side, either in the mental institution or in incarceration in jail, depending on the behavior in the situation, there are no rights. So folks can be force medicated. I was force medicated. I was, just completely stripped of my rights. I was tortured on the other side. They tried putting so many different things in my body. I had no idea what they were giving me. There was no consent to the process, because once you're labeled with that, your voice and your rights no longer exist. Now you're seen as something that needs to be treated, something that needs to be punished. And so that speaks to the criminalization of mental illness. And so what this process does is it sets up capitalism to always win in these situations. It sets up the individual going through these moments and their support networks kind of at a loss for what to do if the courts and the structures of control get involved. And so why that's important is that once you have a label and once it's in your medical records, it is incredibly difficult to regain your agency and be seen as a viable adult able to make decisions for yourself, right? And that's a huge problem, because whatever the issue was that started the emotional crisis or the mental health moment, whatever situation it was that produced the behaviors that were so unwanted and so unacceptable or inappropriate, once that label has been placed, it is so difficult to reclaim your agency. So I remember going through this the first time. I was back in 2009, and I was incarcerated in jail, and they put me on a few different medications. I remember Haldol, which is like a super OG psychotropic, and it gave me brief paralysis. It literally made my body like just close up. I was unable to move, and then being in jail, the guards were all yelling at me to, oh, she's just pretending, oh my God. So then I was being abused by the other women in jail and by the prison, it wasn't prison, by the jail people, correctional, whatever they are. And then the nurse had to come and she gave me Benadryl and it went away, right? So I'm just using that as an example because oftentimes folks who get diagnosed or when they're in this process, sometimes it can be validating, but I want to share this idea and have this conversation about breaking down the DSM and what it's actually used for by looking at it structurally instead of individually, which has been my work for the past like 6-7 years, personally and in community. So how that works though, once someone's labeled, there's a certain polarization that happens. There's this othering that happens. Folks lose credibility, they lose their agency, they're seen as less, they're just seen as less. And I'm really speaking to my experience and the experience of many folks that I've been in group with and facilitated and walked with through this. So I want us to keep in mind that while folks do have reactions or responses to inadequate needs or emotional needs, I really want to pull back the individual blame. And that's what my biggest goal is for this segment piece. It's a lot. All right, I hope this is making sense. So, I want to speak to Maslow's hierarchy of needs quickly, because I'm speaking a lot about needs not being met and how that really has a big part in folks showing behaviors that are not warranted, not wanted, whatever, by society, especially capitalism as a whole. So if you're not going to be able to produce, if you're not going to be able to, if you're not voluntarily going to place yourself in a box and produce for the system, and you are, just not going to do that, well, then you can be labeled with a mental illness. And I believe the definition that I have listed below is something along the lines of mental illness is when someone doesn't perform in an ordinary life or with the norm. And so that's a huge red flag, right? Like, that's to say that each and every one of us has one simple way of being and one way of expressing ourselves, and if you do it differently, then you're fucking crazy. No, no. So really quick, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's the bottom rung is basic human needs: food, water, shelter, warmth, rest. And so already, if you're not getting your physiological needs met, so let's take, for instance, homeless folks who don't have shelter or have issues with getting a meal. If your needs aren't met, your behavior will reflect that. Your emotional distress will reflect that. And that is not an individual problem. That's a societal fucking problem, okay? And it was built this way to polarize, to keep us at ends, to see that person as fucking crazy and I've got my shit together. Meanwhile, I'm oppressing people while I'm in this job, just doing what I have to do to pay my bills, take care of my family, right? Yeah, no, we have to get away from this way of thinking. So the second rung of Maslow's hierarchy is safety and security. Again, folks who don't have safety or security, their behavior is going to reflect that, okay? Now, there are 3 more rungs to Maslow's hierarchy, and if those first two aren't, there's absolutely no way that the 3 top rungs are going to be fulfilled. And that is what's causing the issue. So the next rung is belonging and love. So intimate relationships, friends, family relationships. So in my case, once this all happened to me, my friends and family bailed, right? They had no idea how to deal with me and my bad or unwanted behavior because my needs were not met. And it wasn't so much my needs, it was so much not being heard, not being taken seriously in these moments of very large emotional distress. And now, in hindsight, I know that those were spiritual awakenings, which is why I did the video a couple weeks ago on the Ascension Symptoms. Because a lot of what it looks like when folks are having a mental health crisis is exactly what it looks like when your soul is trying to break free from these boxes that it doesn't feel like it can live and survive in. And those are human rights. That's how we have to heal ourselves and others. Alright, I'm really pissed because it's telling me I only have 3 minutes and I'm nowhere near done. So, this is just the first episode. So, let me just quickly back up. We're going to focus more on the DSM. So, just talking about mental health and all of that. But just to bring it back and set the stage for the next episode. So, the DSM, like I said, there are 8 copies, 8 editions. And the last was published in the last one was published in 2013. And what I want to share is every time there's an edition published, there are more mental disorders. And so in the episodes coming, what I want to do is unpack each edition, and we're going to take a deeper look into what mental illnesses were added, and we're going to also look at the climate of the social economic environment. Okay, so we're going to see what these systems of control are deeming a mental illness, while we look at how folks are trying to survive within capitalism as it is getting larger, global, so, oh my god, I was so excited for this. So, first DSM was written in 1952, the last was written in 2013, and so we're going to start. In the meantime, I did do an episode called Mental Health or Mental Illness, and I don't know what it was called. It was I think it was the second episode if you go to my channel list and my videos. It was about mental health in Amerikkka, and it looked at slavery, the relationship between slavery and mental health. And so there are 2 prezzies in that description box, and as well as my thesis work. So if you're super into this like me, or if you have the time and space, I totally recommend going and checking that video out, and looking at the resources in there. And gotta clean up my phone. Got baby pictures. I don't want to delete my baby pictures. So anyway, I've got to wrap it up, but we're gonna keep going. And yeah, this is what Freedom Friday is gonna be for at least until the end of the year, probably into the beginning of the year as well. There's so much to unpack here, and my goal is that we really alleviate the individual responsibility and start looking at the structures and systems in place and why they are there and how they keep us where we are. And then, of course, look to solutions around that. So I'm really, really, really sorry that this has cut. I really am grateful for you all being here and totally nerding out with me. Hit me up via email or in the comment section. The Mighty Network link is also listed below.